And
That's
it's
almost
like,
wild, man. You
yeah.
like
And
realize that was a thing.
yeah, it's like that happened. And then like suddenly everybody just kind of forgot about it, dropped in, and like went on with their day, and was like, but that little condensed moment there was, oh, everything is completely out of my control, and there was nothing I can do about it.
Mm,
Is that what life is?
mm,
And like these young people were waking up and like, well, look at the landscape right now. People don't even know what truth is. It's and like some things that are just so like 1 + 1 = 2 type of deal. You know, if you like to
yeah.
kind of slightly reference Orwell, and it's like everything is just so in the chaos, in the discombobulation. And it's like people just want to know what is this?
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. So in today's video, what we have is a great dialogue that I actually just did with Zach from the Anglican Acolyte YouTube channel. Zach's a great guy. And in this video, we're going to go over a few things. One, Zach's going to share his personal story. Two, he's going to share some of his vision for what he'd like to see the Anglican Renaissance movement turn into. In the third part of the video, I'm going to give some of my reflections upon this to do with a lot of the things I've touched on my channel before. And Zach and I are going to have a great section of dialogue here back and forth about various things. And then fourth, Zach is going to share some of his vision for what he thinks the Anglican tradition as a whole is, to where he thinks that we're moving towards as a tradition in the long run. And so it's a really great dialogue. If you have the time, I really think it's worth the effort to watch the entire thing. With that said, I am going to put timestamps in this video so you can reference the 4 different parts in the timestamps. With that said, God bless y'all, and let's hop into the interview for today. God's peace. What's up, everybody? I want to welcome you back to the channel for today. So today I have a very special guest on. I have Zach with the Anglican Acolyte be joining us today, and we're just going to be chopping it up about all things Anglican. We're going to go through Zach's story. We're going to go through, he's going to talk a bit about the Anglican Renaissance, and which I'm really excited to hear more about and see as it's passed into his stewardship, how this goes forward from here. And then as well, we're just going to talk about different distinctives of Anglicanism and what makes our tradition unique within the landscape of world Christendom. Okay. And then at the end, we'll talk about where we see Anglicanism going from here as well. So with that said, man who does not need an introduction, but Zach, it's great to have you on the channel, brother. So I thought maybe we could just start. Real quickly as well. I would encourage everybody to go ahead and check out Zach's channel, the Anglican Acolyte. He's got a lot of great content on there. And again, as the Anglican Renaissance gets up and going, I know there's going to be new content being added to it as well going forward. So make sure to check out his channel. And as well, keep in mind a like and subscription to both of our channels can really help continue to push forward this movement and push forward some of the glories of the Anglican faith and the Anglican tradition within the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. So with that said, again, Zach, I want to welcome you to the channel today. Do you mind just starting, brother, with sharing a little bit about your story for us and how you came into Anglicanism and just how your journey closer and deeper into the fullness of the faith has gone throughout your life?
Yeah. So I grew up in the Church of Christ, the Campbellite movement. They're more famous for their idea of no creed but Christ. Yeah, I grew up there ever since I was a little baby, but I didn't become a Christian until I was about 15 or 16. This led into uh like in my teenage years, I had an uncle who was really trying to get me to become a Christian. Um, but he died of pancreatic cancer, and that sent me down a spiral that was just like, teenage angst, anxiety, things like that, and it led to depression and other things like that. And to keep the story brief, because there's a lot going from there to now, um, I had like to my grave, I would say a encounter with God that led me to push past all my agnosticism and anxiety, and I became a Christian at that point. And it wasn't one of those like, oh, I just had like a tingling in my stomach type of deal like the Mormons do. It was one of those like I was at that stage of life where I'm like, if God is real, if the divine is real, I need to see it with my own eyes. And I believe I saw that with my uncle. Like I said, to this day, I swear this is what I saw, where I saw him appear in front of me. He was dressed in white, and he pretty much warned me the path I was going to go down was going to kill me. And he was right, because I was suicidal back then. And he told me, you need to come home. And so I was in the middle of the woods when that happened. I fell to my knees, and my dad, who tried to pick up the work to get me baptized, he went over. He was with me. We were cutting trees, and he ran over. And he thought I was hurt. And he's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And in that moment, I grabbed him and was like, "I need to get baptized, like right now." And at that point, I was giving him excuses upon excuses, like literally even like 20 minutes before. And then suddenly it was like on a dime. It was like, "No, I need to get baptized like yesterday, right now," type of deal.
Yeah.
And so I became a Christian at that point. I got baptized, and I was thinking, I was like, well, God saved my life. He has led me to, find a new purpose. And, I was at that time, I said a prayer where I was like, God, I want you to use me in any way that you see fit. And in my head, I meant, hey, God, I want to go into politics and I want to be a politician, and save Christianity in America. But I don't want to do any of that ministry stuff. And typically when you tell God, hey, God, I don't want to do X, suddenly you find yourself doing X. And so all of my opportunities that I had to go into college for political science, that door slammed in my face. And I was talking to a Church of Christ pastor friend of mine, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I want to do something, but I don't know what. And he's like, well, have you ever tried Bible college? And I was just like, no, I don't even know those exist or anything. So I applied in his office, which fun fact, the office I'm currently sitting in, he used to live here. And so it was in this office I applied.
That's great, man.
And I applied in his office, and then within 12 hours, I get an email back from the college saying, hey, not only are you accepted, you're getting a full ride. And so I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'll go to Bible college, but I'm not doing any of that ministry stuff. I'll go for psychology. And I tried psychology. I like it, but it wasn't vibing with me. I wasn't doing well.
Yeah.
And at the time I was kind of doing some side preaching, because it was like, hey, preach a sermon to a small church, get a small paycheck on Sunday and spend it all at the cafe. And so the secretary for the president of the college approached me and said, hey, do you want to preach at this one small church? And that conversation happened a day after. I jumped over a spot. So the day prior to this whole event, I was in a room, and like I just felt sick to my stomach. And as soon as like I got away from everybody and I went into this room and I shut this door, like suddenly this like pain in my stomach went away, and like I felt like God was trying to talk to me in that moment. And I just remember thinking, it's like, okay, I know God wants me to go into ministry. Ever since I was a little kid, people are like, oh, I could see you as a preacher. I could see you as like a pastor. And at this point, I was like, no. James 3:1, that scares the crap out of me. Teachers and preachers will be judged twice as harshly. My humor is already going to do me in, so I don't need this extra pressure. And so I told God in that moment, I was like, all right, fine, I'll do ministry. I don't care, but you better send me a church. And it's like, I don't care how big or how small. So now jumping back to that day, the secretary is like, hey, this church, they need somebody for this Sunday. Could you preach? I know you're rusty. You haven't done it in forever. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And so that Sunday I go to this little church in the middle of Missouri. And 3 old ladies show up, and I preached probably one of the worst sermons I ever did. Because like I said, I hadn't preached at this point for like 5 months, and I didn't really read. I mean, I had a good structured sermon, but I just didn't practice really at all.
Yeah.
And so it was probably one of the worst sermons I ever preached. And the ladies were like, oh, that was so good. That was so good. And I was like, not really, but thank you. And she's like, would you want to come back? And I was like, sure. I guess I could come back once in a while. And they're like,
that's great.
No, would you like to be our full-time, part-time pastor? And I'm like, I did say no matter how big or how small, I guess 3 old ladies will do. And I was like, sure, yeah, I'll do it. And
that's great.
Yeah, and so by the time I left that church, there was 3 old ladies, and then by the time I left, there was about 15 people on regular going. And then I went to and then I switched my degree to Christian ministries, which is like a general's. And then I went to this other church because I graduated and moved on, and I'd preached there for a couple of years. But while I was there, I was I kept running into a lot of problems that our church had. Like the people were lovely, and I really appreciate the very just Bible focusedness of the Church of Christ. But it's like because we were so zeroed in on the Bible, and if we did reference something, it was John MacArthur or other things like that. It was like we would run into questions about the knowledge of God, the like what the Trinity was, and just questions that I feel like people kind of just had to keep regurgitating and reinventing the wheel just to answer. And I was like, well, what, like there has to be some sort of answer. Like we don't just like need some new book that just gives a slightly different understanding of how things were done. And so because I'm a history nerd and I like philosophy and I started getting into theology at this time, it was like, well, what did the early church have to say on these matters? And so especially since the Church of Christ, one of the monikers that are always talked about is like, well, we're trying to be like the early church. We're trying to be like the early church with all of that man-made tradition stuff. Let's go back to what the early church says. And so if you're trying to figure out what the church has always said, you go back to the early church. And then so I started reading the apostolic fathers and whatnot. And it's like, well, they're saying a lot of things, but none of the things they're saying are what we say. And it's like, well, maybe Ignatius got things wrong. Maybe he was just getting a little ahead of himself. It's like, well, let's see what the next guys say. And I started just going on and on and on, looking out throughout church history. And by the time I'm getting to like where the Church of Christ starts coming into now, it's like, oh, so we have a problem here. Because it's like, from what the entirety of the church is saying, either everybody pretty much since right after John dies, either everybody got things wrong and somehow we figured it all out 1800 years later, or something else is happening here. Maybe I'm wrong. And at that time I started looking into Reformed theology and whatnot. And it just, there was a situation at the church. I'm not going to get fully into it. Pretty much there was a church split about to happen. And I was put into a situation where it was like somebody had to go, and to ease tensions, I was like, I'll go. I'll live on good intentions and everything like that. It wasn't anything like controversial with me, but it was just like my style versus the last guy's style clashed, and the two big families in the church were kind of warring with each other. And it was like, to keep you two together, I'm apparently a thorn in the side and I gotta go. And so I dip out and I leave. And it was last year, it was building up to 2023, 2024 into 2025. I started looking at things like Anglicanism because, I would see the papacy and I would have these issues with it. I was really looking to Eastern Orthodoxy, but I got disgruntled, and there was a lot of just stuff that just wasn't honest, especially with a lot of like online modern commentators from Orthodoxy, where it's hard to say that you're an unchanging church when there's visible examples of the church changing, and there's just other like things that were just not, that again, in my opinion, just weren't honest. And so I started looking into Anglicanism, and this is actually where Sean Luke comes into the picture in 2023, because I went to the Gospel Coalition in Indianapolis in 2023, and I was there for Gavin Ortland because I knew Gavin was going to be there. I didn't even know Sean was going to be there, and at this time I subscribed to his channel, but it's like, oh, Sean Luke, he's such a cool dude, but I'll never meet this guy. And I remember walking by the Trinity evangelical table, and I see him, and I do one of those like things like they do in movies where like the guy just like walks by and then he just like take 5 steps back and just like look, and I was like, I walk over like,
I know you.
Yeah, I was like, are you Sean Luke from Anglican Converse? He's like, yeah, dude, yeah, that's my YouTube channel. I was like, I'm a big fan.
You're a legend,
that's
man.
so cool. And it was funny because I got to talking with him, and he had a little bit of free time. We went and got coffee, and I was talking about it. I was like, yeah, I've heard about this Book of Common Prayer. I've kind of looked into it. I've sat in on a couple of friends when they do it in the evening. And he's like, well, IVP, they have one. And we walked over to the table, and he hands me this one that I still have to this day. And he's like, here, dude, you should check it out. And so throughout the day, I was going through it and I was reading it, and by the time I got back from the conference at midnight, so I've been reading this thing all day, and like I've pretty much finished it, and I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever read, like besides
Man.
the Bible. And I came back to it and I was like, hey, yes, I read the Book of Common Prayer, like this is cool. And he's like, yeah, dude, you should include it in your prayers. And and I credit Sean for being the one who set me on the path towards Anglicanism, because again, at that time I was still wrestling with Reformed theology and things like that. Yeah. And by the time I left my old church, now jumping back, I know I keep jumping back and forth. I like to include little details. I also met Gavin Ortland at a
oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah. It was one of those things I was like, okay, I'm going to see him on stage. It's going to be so cool. And he was over at the Crossway table, I believe. Not table, but he was just kind of just walking around.
Yeah.
And it was one of those, like, I walked by, took 3 steps back, and I was like, oh crap, it's Gavin Ortland. And I'm just like, hey, big fan
like
myself.
Sports legend, man, or something.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I jokingly call Gavin Ortland a liar, quote unquote, because like when he's not teaching, he's a lot louder. And he's very like, yeah, man, so cool. And it's like right when he gets in teaching. So today we're going to talk about that.
Very astute and learned, yeah.
So when I heard him get all excited like that, and on a dime, I saw him going to teacher mode. I'm like, you sit on a throne of lies. You're not as calm and collected as I thought, but he's cool. And I have
oh man, I love Gavin Ortland, man.
Yeah, he's
I used to show his stuff when I taught high school. Anyways,
yeah. So yeah, he was cool too. But then so right when I get back to Minnesota from Missouri, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, all right, I got to figure out where I'm going, because like I like Reformed stuff, I like Anglican stuff. I flirted a little bit with Lutheranism, but not like a crazy amount. And so I was looking at different denominations at the time, and in a practical sense of looking at it, going Reformed was just not on the menu, because it was like, okay, in order for you to get into a teaching position, you have to have like a PhD and like 30 years of experience, and then we'll let you in. And I'm like, I don't know about that. Like that's quite a bit. And it was funny because even like I was friendly, but I talked to one, I think it was like the RPCNA, I think. One of them, he lists out this like laundry list of like things that you need in order to just even be in the pulpit. And he literally went, yeah, it's kind of hard to find guys these days to fill our pulpits. And I'm like, I wonder why. But I started kind of swaying towards Anglicanism more, because it's like there was just a lot, like I couldn't give up the prayer book, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. And so I looked at the ACNA, and they were kind of the same thing of like, hey, you can just check out one of our churches and wait a couple years, and then we could look at potential ordination. And it was like the nearest church where I'm at right now is like it's like a 2-hour back and forth, and I'm like, that's a lot. I was like, you can't bring anybody down here. Like, yeah, and they didn't really give me a solid answer on that, which I mean, I get it, I understand, like if sources are limited there. And so I started kind of just looking all over the place, and eventually a friend of mine and I stumbled on the UECNA, and I was like, well, at this point I have no other options. I might as well, because at this point I already accepted infant baptism. Like I said, I love the prayer book and whatnot, and those are kind of like two qualities that don't really vibe well in the Church of Christ. And so I contacted the UEC, and the Archbishop Peter gave me a call, and we had probably like a 30 to an hour minute conversation. I was like, I'm a pastor, explained, I just laid all the cards down. This is what happened in my last church. This is all the events that led up to this. This is why I like the prayer book, and I would really like to get back into doing ministry. And he's like, well, I definitely can tell that you have a heart for ministry, and you clearly, this is something you want to do. And obviously we don't have any churches in Minnesota, and the closest thing you got is Michigan, but I'm willing to work with you, and I'm willing for you to start we have a training thing called the Latimer Theological Seminary. It's unaccredited, but you work with the Archbishop. And he's like, we'll have you do a certificate of Anglicanism. We'll get you settled away, come to our convocations, come to our clericas, just get familiar with everybody. Later on, I find Father Patrick, who runs the Order of St. Patrick, which I'm a part of.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk more about that later.
Yeah. And so that like was like double the training more than I would get. You know, he's like, if you do all that stuff, if you stick with us, we'll work with you and we'll get you ordained. But that's what I'm willing to do. And I tell people, I'm like, once he pretty much was one of the only ones who kind of gave me the time of day and said, I'm willing to work with you, and gave me a list of what I had to do. I was like, yeah, I about started crying over the phone because I was like, this is what, and like even then, it's like with
that,
you,
man.
yeah.
The fact he took that much time with you is an extraordinary blessing, man.
Oh yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah, and I've met him a handful of times, and we talk not super regularly since he's really busy, but I've gotten to really know him, and he's really learned to trust me, and has gotten me into a good group of guys who like we're pretty much a brotherhood, and I love these dudes. And so so that I've been with them since 2025. I just officially got confirmed in August, and because I've been doing training prior up to that point, and then I'm still doing it now. If everything goes well, I should be ordained as a deacon the 23rd or the 24th of September, because that's when our big
God willing, man,
convention is happening. So that's what led me to Anglicanism. That was the best I could do in about under 20 minutes with about 10 years of almost like 15 years of actually no, it is 15 years. Like 15 years of
I feel
story.
Like you're in the line of St. Augustine or C.S. Lewis, man, like this long intellectual journey, right?
I hope so.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, Zach, thanks for sharing, bro. Honestly, that's a beautiful story. It's so fascinating to me. I have had a similar experience, actually. Mine was a little different, but where just, I wanted to keep putting myself out there in various intellectual circles. And eventually he's a famous Methodist scholar who's now passed, but Billy Abraham, or William J. Abraham. I would send out these like long emails about like the Eucharist, and you know what I mean, and things like this. And at one point he just emailed me back and was like, this is like the leading Methodist scholar in the world, just emailed me back like, hey, here's my phone number. You want to hop on and chat? And just the fact of him taking like an hour of time, I still feel like indebted to him. And like, I just feel so grateful. So when people take the personal time to talk with you, I think that's really, really meaningful. So
yeah, pretty much after that conversation, like I said, I about cried over the phone. And then like in that moment, I tell people, I'm like, like I went loyal to Peter so much. So I was like, I'm willing to like die for him at that point. So it's like, so like there's no hint of just the ACNA gives me like a church and like a pension. Whatever. I was like, I wouldn't care. Like
that's straight out of the New Testament, though, man. Right? It's like like it's like Timothy and Paul. It's when somebody takes you under your wing, how meaningful that can be for a young man too. I love that, man. I also think it's fascinating that like Anglican aesthetics and Gavin Ortland were a big part of your journey. So my story, and I won't share mine in depth now, you can reference other videos for mine, but I was raised in the Methodist tradition. So I was raised in the English world and basically found myself, for reasons of ecclesiology and sacramentology, feeling that I needed to go up the candlestick. So I kind of feel like I'm still in the same tradition, just, higher up, more apostolic, and God bless the Methodists. I went to a Methodist seminary too, so, I kind of got that background. But I find, so it's fascinating, the ACNA church that I go to, there's a huge number of young men that come there, and so many of them came to Anglicanism through the internet, which is just fascinating, right? It's like mind-boggling to think that, what people are doing on the internet, such as what we're doing right now, can have a real impact. So that's really cool. Shout out to Sean Luke for that. It's almost like seeing a celebrity, man. I don't think people realize that. I mean, he probably doesn't think of himself that way, but it's like seeing, a sports star and you're like, oh man, I know you. It's kind of weird, it's fascinating. So.
Yeah, like I said, the fact I saw him like working at the Trinity, I was like, oh, he has like it probably has his own exhibit. He's like, no, I'm just promoting the college. And it's just like, I'm literally like starstruck right now. So
it's funny, man. My wife will I don't know if I should say this, but it's funny. My wife will sometimes tell me, so okay, I'm gonna be super transparent with you, Zach. That first time I hopped on the live stream with you and Sean Luke, and you guys talked about my channel, I went and like ran upstairs and told my wife, and she told me that I was fanboying. And it was so funny, man. But I was like, oh, like somebody finally recognized, do you know what I mean? That like I exist. Anyways, it's a cool feeling when you finally get like recognized, or you see somebody you know and they talk back to you through the camera or something. It's really fascinating, or in real life. So
Yeah, it was one of those when you popped in, I was like, oh, it's like whatever, nice to see you three. And I was like, oh, that's nice to see you three. I was like, oh no, that's my best behavior now.
That's funny, man. There's that ecumenical guy coming on.
It's like,
That's great, man. That's good stuff, man. Well, Zach, again, thanks for sharing, bro. That's a beautiful and profound testimony. We'll overcome by the word of God in our testimony. So I appreciate you
yeah.
sharing, man. And I think it's just, actually think that's a track that a lot of Anglicans, I've actually met other Anglicans who come out of the Church of Christ. And anyway, it's really interesting. Again, that's a world that I don't know as well. You and I actually kind of come from different worlds in that sense. They come from like the mainline soft liberal world. I'm not, I've been conservative since I was young,
Yeah.
but I kind of come from that world of like soft liberal mainline, and moved up the candlestick. And it sounds like you came from a very
A
different
lower church.
background and
Yeah.
then came the other way. But we've both landed in this beautiful tradition. So it's fascinating,
Yeah.
to go
I
over
kind
these
of had a
stories.
moment like that with a friend too, where he at first started very like high Anglo-Catholic, about Anglo-papalist, and I went like the polar opposite way, evangelical, like almost leaning Presbyterianism. It's like we kind of I started reading guys like Pusey. I was like, well, maybe not everybody from the Oxford movement was terrible, and then he started reading guys like Charles Simeon. He's like, well, maybe everybody from the evangelical wasn't terrible, and we kind of just like landed like right in the middle, and that's what we.
Yeah.
At first, we were like, we're friends, but we
That's
talk crap
interesting.
behind each other's back. But now it's just like, hey, we're now level with each
There's
other,
a
and it's like,
tension going on here, man.
yeah, and then it's like after we kind of met in the middle, and we had like this big
Yeah.
like kumbaya moment. It's like,
Yeah.
maybe we were both the problem, and maybe this is where we both need to be. And he's like, yeah, I think so. And so we've been close ever since. And he helps me a lot with like research and history and things like that.
Hey, bro, I riff about this a lot on my channel, but Romans 9-11, God will humble all men, the Jews and the
Hmm.
Gentiles both need to be humbled. And there's kind of this, when I say tension, I don't even mean like clashing. I mean more so like it's like jangling and tension. I always
Hmm.
use this imagery of like an ecosystem where like different elements jangle together over a long, long period of time, and through that, like a beautiful reality comes forth. I think that's Anglicanism, man. It's like world Christendom and
Yeah,
many kind of held in tension. Yeah. Anyways, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later
yeah,
too. But cool, man. Sweet, bro. Well, let's go ahead and hop onto the second topic now. Do you want to share a little bit about the Anglican Renaissance? I know it's been a great project that Joe's been working on for a long time. Um, Fascinatingly enough, all the churches I attend, I think, are on the map. Even the conservative Episcopal ones that I attend are on the map, which is
yeah,
interesting. Um, I attend both conservative Episcopal and an ACNA church. Um, but uh, but yeah, I'd love to hear just kind of your
yeah.
vision and where you see God taking it, and just the vision you see for the future as you take on the stewardship of this great ministry.
Yeah, so Joe started the movement with the idea, and this is on the website, where it says the purpose of the Anglican Renaissance is to promote classical traditional Anglicanism. This means Anglicanism that conforms to the entire apostolic deposit handed down to us in Holy Scriptures and reflected accurately in the three creeds, 39 articles, 1662 Book of Common Prayer, the Book of Homilies, and the Ordinal. And he led it for a while, and he got there was a couple of factors. Like one of them, he went to the Episcopal Church, got really busy and things like that. And at that time, I joined up with it, and I was kind of like one of the ones just kind of chugging the boat along a little bit. And eventually, him and I had a conversation. He's like, "Hey, I'm going to Episcopal. I don't want to see this thing die. You've been
Mhm,
helping out a lot. Do you want it?"
mhm,
And at first, I'm like, I don't know why you're not asking Sean or any of these other like guys, why me type of deal. I was like, well, I'll pray about it, I'll think about it, and I'll get back to you. And after a couple days, it's like, well, I've had ideas about what I want to do, but I don't want to step on people's toes and things like that. And again, at the end of the day, it's like it's Joe's movement, not mine. And so I kept praying about it. And it's like, there is a lot of people who desperately want Anglicanism back. And Anglicanism right now is in such a chaotic state with what's going on with the Church of England, GAFCON, or I guess the GAC now, like
yeah.
is stabilizing itself, but in a lot of ways that have some people concerned. ACNA with the Archbishop getting in trouble, and they're like that's all chaotic, and like there's just a lot of, and then it's like we have to kind of come to the Matt Walsh style of question of like, well, what the heck is even an Anglican to begin with? And so there's just a lot of chaos right now. And there are like I said, there are so many just young men and women out there, and even like older men and women who they just want Anglicanism. And it's one of those moments of, if you want to see change in the world, you got to be the change that you want to see. And for me, it's like, all right, well, here's what I'm gonna do. It's like, I'm gonna take what Joe said with that phrase I just read, and if this is what people want, I'm gonna try to help them with it. And so, we're still keeping that there. And then I started laying down ideas of like, okay, this is what I'd like to see. I see Sean trying to start up a catechism training thing. And, since him and I, like, we reconnected after 2023 and we became friends, I was like, hey, this is what the Anglican Renaissance is. This is the ideas I have. I want you involved. And I want, instead of like trying to like micro fraction be a whole bunch of Anglican movements at once, I kind of want to put it under one big umbrella of like, let's do catechism training. Let's do, let's look at the articles and the homilies and the prayer book and bring these back into consideration of authority, rather than just, oh, it's a nice historical document and doesn't mean anything. It's like, that's not what the church said. That's not what the church believed. Bishop Conybeare didn't write a whole thing about the subscription to the articles for people hundreds of years later to go, well, actually, no, not really. Like, no, they were authoritative. They had always been authoritative. And the minute we stop looking at such things as authoritative, that's when the problems started flowing. And so it's like, we need to do this. We need to, because we're in such a postmodern world where your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth, and what the heck is truth even? The Bible itself is always questioned. So it's like, that's not what the classical Anglicans believe. They believe in the inerrancy of Scripture. Let's bring that back. Let's instead of just having this be like an layman only online ruckus, let's get clergy involved. Because if we're going to truly be the change we want to see in the Anglican Church, well, we need everybody. And, there are plenty of groups like GAFCON, ACNA, UEC, ACC, APA, APCK, and like others where it's like, we're going to have our differences. We use different prayer books. We use different styles of worship and whatnot. But there are plenty of people in the ACNA I could work together well with. I'm friends with Father Jeremiah of like, he's on YouTube. I just for some reason blanked hardcore on his YouTube channel. I have it pulled up here. Let me just grab it real quick.
I know what you mean though. He's a priest with the great beard, right?
Oh yeah, he has a fantastic goatee. So it's like, Father Jeremiah, he is like one of my good friends. And it's like, I don't have any Grace Anglican Gastonia.
Okay.
I always switch Grace Gastonia. That's where like it gets my brain all boggled. It's like, I love him to death. He's one of my friends. And it's like, obviously, Sean, he's ACNA. And, I just met Father Seth with his church on YouTube. And also I follow him on Instagram. It's like, I like this dude. And it's like, there's just so many people where it's like, we're all kind of doing the same thing at once, but we're just not working together because, well, you're ACNA, I'm UECNA, and that makes us rivals for some reason. And it's like, why are we doing this? Like, I get it, we're gonna have differences, but it's like, why am I pushing somebody out who I could work well with? And like, one new thing that is kind of new-ish is pushing monasticism. Like, you don't have to. There are different style of orders. Like, I'm in a modified order where married people can join, for instance. And the whole purpose of our order is to be missional and get the lay person to go deeper in their faith rather than just be a casual Sunday person. And so that's the one I'm in.
Isn't the traditional language an oblate?
Yeah.
Or a lay member monastic. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of them. But like, I have a friend who is a celibate monk in his order as well. And it's like, both of these are fine. And so so like, there's plenty of things. And I said this in Reverend Jared Jones' YouTube video that's not out yet. It's going to be this next Monday. I just tell people, I'm like, I'm not innovating anything. I'm not bringing anything new to the table because it's like, I don't need to, because people do that all the time. That's why nobody knows what Anglicanism is, because we're all trying to be like, well, actually, here's my definition of an Anglican. Here's my definition of an Anglican. It's like, well, what has the classical Anglican Church taught? What do they believe? What, like, that's an Anglican. And so let's go back to that. That's easy. And it's like, for instance, like the prayer book, the one we promote is the 1662. In the UECNA, we both use the 1928 and the 1662. And you're probably thinking, well, Zach, why don't you just promote the 1928? Well, why don't you just promote the 2019? It's like, unfortunately, with Anglicanism, because there's so much diversity and diversity is strength or something like that. If you start whipping out everybody's favorite prayer book, suddenly there's a prayer book tribal warfare going on. And so I look through virtually everybody's websites, and it's like, okay, what is something we can consistently look at that is going to cause the least amount of bickering in all these groups? And it was the 1662. And this one was accepted and was the authoritative one. Everybody looks at it as some sort of authoritative in one way or another. So it's like, all right, to stop the fighting, we're going to promote this prayer book. And if it comes down later, we'll start including others. But for right now, let's work with one. And that's all we need to do is just let's work with one. Let's start simple. Same thing with the like with the 39 articles. It is great to see a lot of young people really considering the 39 articles as something as authoritative again, because it's like, guys, there is vagueness in these articles, but not in such a way where it can just be anybody's interpretation for anything, and that's how you can get a non-denom Anglican and a Roman Catholic Anglican, quote unquote, and put these two together. It's like, it's not like that. It's not so vague that it can be anybody's, cafeteria theology. But it's like, it has flavors of Reformed, it has flavors of Lutheranism, it has flavors of Roman Catholicism mixed in there, but in and of itself, it's its own thing. Just like the English Church. The English Church didn't start with Henry VIII. It was always there. And it had a unique history. It had a unique spirituality with Celtic spirituality, for instance, and Anglo-Saxon spirituality. It's like there was uniqueness there. And this can be promoted without having to try to try to steal from other groups. And I think that's honestly what has been the detriment for the Anglican Church forever, is because, especially of recent history, because you have things like the Puritans, and you have instances with the nonconformists, and later with guys who, like, especially the 1800s, it just goes completely off the rails with the Oxford movement, the evangelical response to it and everything, where people just kind of collectively lost their mind and went, well, we either need to be buddies with Rome, we need to be so far away from Roman Catholicism, we're just going to strip anything that looks too pretty away from our tradition because it's too popish. And it just turns into this wild craziness. And then obviously right when the 20th century hits with postmodernism and everything, the Anglican Church, while it survives, especially especially when we start getting into the 70s, we start just including things that are not biblical and are not traditional, especially, and we're just kind of told to go along with it. And that's where eventually you get two groups. You either get people who say that they're not doing this and they want tradition, or you get people who just are whatever. Tradition can be helpful and the scripture can be helpful and other things, but we're doing our own thing, and we're trying to be an example for the world, and by being an example, just accept everything the world ever says. And then suddenly you have churches that are just non-denominational, you have churches that are non-profit social justice groups that don't really preach Christ, and people were stuck with those. And so, like I was saying, with everything, the Anglican Renaissance movement is not innovative. It's not new. It's nothing that it's coming out of Zach, the Anglican Acolyte's mind as the new style of Anglicanism. It's in fact the opposite. It's, no, don't listen to me. Listen to Cranmer. Listen to Hooker. Listen to Jewell. Listen to guys like, like guys like Laud. Guys that come from the Oxford movement, like Pusey. Like, listen to these guys who are telling you this is what the church has always believed, and let's try to bring back a traditional church that can stand against the liberalism that has infected these places. And we're not going to completely explode overnight and become super, super popular. We're going against the grain, like with me making this movement be what it is. It's like, I'm not, and I was trying to avoid this, but inevitably I can't anymore. We're not the Reconquista. We're just not. We're a response in a way to the Reconquista as well, where, and I said this on Joshua Pearsall's channel, Practical Christian Lessons. He's a fantastic YouTuber. Right? We just had a live stream this morning where it's like, I see the people in the Episcopal Church that are stuck and they can't get out of this liberal church for some reason because there's nothing. It's like, I get it. I've never been in that situation personally, but it's like, I get it. You want theology, you want Anglicanism so bad, and you're not getting that. And it's like, I'm here to help. And there are plenty of other people backing me who are here to help. And it's like, we're not going to just call you all heretics and condemn you. It's like, a lot of your teachers I will. And it's like, I'll say it to your face, like, if you're teaching things that are not found within, scripture, what are you other than a heretic? And it's like, people need to kind of start laying their foot down a little bit. And it's like, like I was saying with Anglicanism, if you're not teaching something that is Anglicanism, it's not Anglican. So quit trying to make it Anglican. Like, like the Puritans broke from the Church of England. They're not Anglican. So why are we trying to sound and look like Presbyterians? The non-denom churches, I love them. There are plenty of great people in the non-denom church, but when you diminish your Anglicanism so much so that I could pull up two pictures of a non-denom church and an Anglican church and you can't tell the difference, that's a problem. It's like, and you can do it the same way with Rome. There are some Anglicans who are so crazy about Rome that I could take a picture of their church and a Romish church and they look the same. And it's like, that's not Anglican. You're LARPing as something that you're not. And, like, if you want to go those ways and you want to become a non-denom church or a Presbyterian church or like a Roman Catholic church, I don't care. Like, that's between you and God at that point. But it's like, don't try to make my tradition into something it's not. And for those people in the Episcopal churches that want the tradition, it's like, here are the guys to read. Here are the prayer books to pray in. Here are the ways the church has always been. And that's why, like I said, like, I'm trying to work with the ACNA. I'm trying to work with like the REC and GAFCON and all these other guys, because it's like, we don't need any more division. Now, again, are we going to just be totally kumbaya, shoulder to shoulder? Absolutely not. But we can at least come together and say, there's a bigger problem, and we need to figure out this problem before we start having our discussions. Right now, the liberalism has taken over the Anglican Church in such a way it's grievous and is borderline about as big of a crisis, in my opinion, as the Arian Church. We need to figure this out first before we start bickering about prayer books. And so that's why I started really pushing this movement. And I have really, like, the big thing right now is just getting the word out. Like, hey, there's a movement. There's this thing happening. There's a lot of people already jumping on board with it. They're so excited. And it's like, we just need to get the word out. And especially with clergy, just get it out to them and say, hey, there are people so hungry for Anglicanism right now. We need you. And we need to get this thing going so that we can not really take back our church in a quote unquote Reconquista way of like trying to bargain with people to get our churches back. It's like, you're either with us or you're not. And our plan is to build up the lay people with catechism training, with theological training, things like that, and start putting our foot down in a very righteous but very stern way of saying, we're not putting up with this anymore, because we can't afford it. We're like, the Episcopal Church is one of the fastest dying churches right now. And that's for a reason. We can't be doing this anymore if we're going to survive. And so that's a very brief overview is what I can explain with the Anglican Renaissance. It's a movement bringing back tradition, bringing back what has always been taught by the church, and a movement that is putting the foot down so that people can understand that there are Anglicans that actually care about their tradition and their faith, and not just be a carpet to be stepped on and walked over.
Zach, thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing your vision for this, man. It's a really fascinating movement. that I think certainly has the potential to bear a lot of fruit. And so my prayer is that the fruit it's meant to bear is what comes out.
Yeah.
Now I will say for anybody who's followed my channel, and we'll get to this in the next section as well. Um, Obviously, I would bring a very, in certain ways, a little bit of a different lens to certain things. I probably the main thing I like to riff about on my channel, but I do it because I think it's so central. Is I believe that I do believe I would hold development of doctrine, which I know is pretty much akin to most. Would you use that terminology in your thinking, the development of doctrine?
Um, Probably for the most
I'm
part,
opening
I
up a
would.
can of worms here, bro.
Yeah. Well, I get boxing gloves on.
Yeah.
No, I would say, yeah, obviously there are some developments that happen. For instance, like me wearing this cassock, obviously they weren't rocking these in the first century.
Yeah.
So like things did develop, but yeah, it's just
Mhm.
one of those, some people get a
Mhm.
little too crazy with the developing part. And
You do have to have principles with it for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. And so that's why I was kind of rallying in the earlier part where I was like, like at one point the wheels kind of just fall off and suddenly it just everything is on the table. Hey, let's
Everything
do the
becomes on the
Sparkle
table.
Creed. Yeah. And
But yeah, and I get that. I get that concern, man. I guess I'm trying to, and this will transition us into the third part, which I think will make for a really healthy
yeah.
dialogue between us. And again, this is a dialogue of brothers, by the way, for all those watching. Um, I think the way that I would frame it, the reason I bring up development of doctrine, obviously that's a very loaded term, but I would also argue that since the time of the Reformation, that really all of our traditions on some level have developed our thinking. But I think that with that said, it's just like the development needs to come from the seed of the gospel, right? All Christian thought needs to come from the seed of the gospel in the apostolic age. I also think that certain emphasis that come out in something like the 39 Articles or something, I would even say the Council of Trent, but that there's certain emphasis or substance that does it's understanding it's the language that's used in the modern Roman Catholic Anglican dialogues, the ecumenical dialogues that go on, is the concept of re-reception. And so, and we'll get to this towards the end, but I think this is where systematic and contextual theology is going to play a really big deal. So when we're reading something like the 39 Articles, are we reading it in the context of 1571, or are we reading it such as a document like the Westminster Confession, where it's like point, point, point? But I think what I would just one big thing in my channel that I like to at least bring into the conversation is something for us all to wrestle with is this notion of can the historical Anglican principles, so something like what's coming out of Hooker or what's coming out of John Jewel or later on what's coming out of the Carolingians, can that be brought into discussion with a post-Vatican II church that's undergone its intellectual growth and its intellectual deepening, and I would say re-reception of its previous dogma, um, to such a degree that, like, how do the Novel theologians like Henri de Lubac, who I know one of our own, Hans Boersma, talks about a lot and is probably one of the leading scholars in the world on. But how does the theology of like the Novel theologians, which are really trying to base their thinking in patristic and really Augustinian sign and sacrament thought, how does that come into play with some of our great divines like Hooker and Jewel and again the Carolingians, Lancelot Andrewes, William Laud, these guys, and how do we move forward from here? And so on
Mhm.
my channel, what I always try to do is I try to bring some of the traditional sources into conversation with a post-Vatican II conciliar world. And how can we move forward from there? With that said, I do want to, again, as somebody who grew up in the UMC, and I'm not here to disparage any groups at all, I do absolutely get the concern of like this wild pluralism that comes in where you end up with no backbone. You kind of look like a jellyfish. And for me, that the tension is always like Anglicanism. I kind of see it as I almost see it as like an ecumenical project in many of world Christendom, and that at its very best, it can relay. It can lead to like the plene essay, like a real fullness of the Catholic faith in its full breadth. That's very patristic. It's very biblical, and it takes the best from everybody and holds it within it. There's a great saying that N.T. Wright says. I don't know if you've heard this before, Zach, but N.T. Wright will say, it's not that Anglicans have any doctrine of their own. It's just that if something is true, Anglicans happen to believe it.
Mhm.
It's a great saying. Um, But I try to think about how can that. Where was I going with this? I try to talk about and think about how can a principled uh, like looking at our tradition or no, this is what I was saying. I was saying at its best, they can lead to like the plene essay, the real fullness of the full breadth of the Catholic faith as passed down from the first millennium and the first century. But then on the flip side of that, it also has the potential to be catastrophic. And I think
Mhm.
that's where we see this like wild liberalism coming in. And I like to say, just to be cogent, I like to say sometimes Anglicanism makes you want to hit your head against the wall, right? And I think that's what you're speaking to.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because the 20th century we get latitudinarianism, right? And you get kind of
Hmm.
this unprincipled like wildness that leads to the crazy liberalism we see today. And again, God's peace to all involved. Um, but on the flip side, I also think the 20th century bears out figures like William Temple and Archbishop Arthur Michael Ramsey, who in my mind is like the pinnacle of Anglican thought. And that what they're really doing is they're bringing in an older method in line with like again the thought of the Novell theologians and a post Vatican II conciliar world, and so which leads to the modern Archic documents. And so it's a little bit of a riff, but I guess just in my mind, I think of like Gavin Ortland's YouTube channel named Truth Unites. And my goal, what I always want to do on my channel, is try to bring into line like the substance of what one tradition is saying. And is there a way that when we really get to the core of it, where there can actually be a sense of overlap and unity? I guess just real quick, and then we'll move on to the next topic. But one example I would give of this is like in the 16th century, I think the Anglican concern coming out of the medieval era was there was a concern that we want to make sure that the sacrifice of the Mass is not like a re-sacrificing of Christ, right? Because there's only one sacrifice. But then the Roman Catholic concern was this notion that there's a different distancing from the once for all sacrifice and its merits and what's occurring on each and every altar. And it's in the process of really like wrestling with this over years that we've come to this I would say a really agreed upon statement of anamnesis, where it's built off of the notion of the Seder meal. And so like when Jewish people participate in the Seder meal, they're not just abstractly remembering the Exodus, right? They're participating in it. And so with us, what's going on is space and time are elapsed in a sense, and the cross and the eschaton and all the saints' altars ever celebrated all are one, and there's one mysterion, one mystery, and it's in that one that the once for all sacrifice is represented on our altar, and the eschatological reality of it's also on the altar, and there's a unity of persons and of the reality with God himself. And so for me, that's an example where truth has united us. And both concerns, like the concerns that I think you're trying to bring forward with the Anglican Renaissance, are brought into line with the concerns that I think I would argue in substance Rome held. And here I'd reference a dialogue like the one Gavin Ortland did with Dr. Brett Salkeld. If you want to check that out, that's on Gospel Simplicity's channel. That's a great dialogue. But that for me would be kind of my impetus, would be to want to bring that forward. Um, but I think that there's a way to do that with the concerns of traditional Anglicanism being taken into account. So I just wanted to give again
Yeah.
that gives a lot of stuff for us to chat about. But
Yeah.
that's kind of some of my initial reflections on how do we deal with it. And again, I say this as somebody who loves so much coming out of the 16th century as you've shared in
Yeah.
the 17th century. So
Yeah. I think the biggest thing right now is before we can start, and it's kind of the same thing with like when I was going with the prayer books. It's like we can have these conversations, but not right now, because right now there are too many problems that not. And again, this isn't just with Anglicanism. It's like with any group at this point. There's just so much individualism of, well, whatever I think is best,
hmm,
that's what I'm going to do. Like, I mean, you see this all the time in the Church of Christ. Like throw women's ordination out there on the table.
hmm,
It's like, I did a video where, I go through a brief overview of like almost the like entirety of the church history. And so you don't find women's ordination until
hmm,
um 1853 is the first time it's approved of by our Congregational Church. The earliest but prior to that is 1815 in a Free Will Baptist church. And it's like, Scripture never talks about it. God could have ordained it plenty of times, and the only time we can make an argument is through vague references from like Phoebe or Junia. But again, if it was such a clear, completely, wow, we get it, we understand it type of deal, it's like, then why for almost 1800 years, 1700 years, if you want to be on the technical dot of it, everybody got it wrong? And we could say, well, it's a development of understanding. It's like, but in order for development to happen, it kind of needs to develop. You can't just throw flour and egg into a bowl and go, look, artisan bread. It's like, there has to be some sort of understanding of like, we have the pieces and here's how it developed over time. This is how we understood it. But that's just not what happened. It was, oh, hey, the Romantic period is happening. A lot of like questioning of traditionalism is happening. Why have we always had guys in the in the pulpit? Well, let's change that. Women. And if it's not found in Scripture, if it's not found in church history, then it's like, there has to be something here that isn't right. And it's the same thing with since we both believe in the real presence, it's like the same thing with like communion. That there has always been an understanding of communion until somebody suddenly one day said, well, actually, contrary to everything everybody has ever said since the church history, I believe there is no presence in the Scripture. And
that's
it's like
problem, that kind of
and it's like and it's easy to kind of just say, okay, well, this is one part in history, but it's like these errors have now also developed. Like for instance, in the Church of Christ, if you were to use the phrase concupiscence at me, I would have no idea what you're talking about. I think you're like speaking a different language. But here I am, and I jump into Lutheran circles, Anglican circles, Roman Catholic. Everybody's like, oh yeah, the concupiscence. It's like, yeah. What is that?
That's great.
And it's like, and like things like baptism and things like, like I said, ordination and communion and even catechisms. If you're to say I'm reading my catechism right now, I would literally,
that word is,
it's like, what is a catechism?
I get it, bro.
Yeah. And so because these errors have developed and now they're so entrenched,
you need clear teaching. I definitely concur with that.
And so with the latitudinarian movement in Anglicanism right now being, again, just Anglicanism can be whatever I want to be because I, the individual, now the arbiter of my truth. How can we have these conversations of development when throughout the entirety of our conversations we have to constantly be like, no, sorry, we're not this, we're this, no, sorry,
you have to qualify everything, right? Like,
and you have to do it until you're about blue in the face, and then you can have the conversation. And by the time you get to that point, you have and by that point you already have like 30 different like developments of error. And so it's like, we need to stop developing just for 5 minutes and say, let's reel
say
back
what
in.
I get that, man. And maybe we're speaking on different wavelengths here a little bit.
Maybe.
Again, this is really this is, I'd say, just this certainly happens in politics, but it really happens in theology too. There's just different like levels and layers to what we're always referencing, know. And so I can get the way I like to lay it out, man. And when I say this is said with, again, this is my Methodist coziness. I just try to be gentle in everything I say. But the great Methodist line is, what do you get with two Methodists? You get three opinions and a potluck, bro. That kind of bears out in my life. But so I say this with respect, but you always have to know who you're talking to. Like, so at one point in my life, I helped with Young Life a little bit. Let me tell you, bro, and that's a great ministry in so many ways. Super different from doing like youth ministry. Because like when I was in a Methodist youth leader, the kids have such a deeper level of comprehension of just like what I consider very basic Christian things. Where like when you go to Young Life, man, you got to like, you can't just even throw out a word like the Gospels or something like that and just presume that they know, or it said like, well, Moses did this on Mount Sinai, like, you know what I mean? But then there's different levels, right? And so we go up and up and up in level. And so I get that need for like, I actually think, I actually haven't read it to be transparent, but from what I know of it, a catechism like To Be a Christian, like the ACNA one, in general, those are pretty good, like basic catechisms. You know what I mean? Like the Apostles' Creed, the Ten Commandments. Um, and we definitely we need to start with general comprehension.
Yeah.
I think there's another conversation that happens though, and this would kind of be again my riff, to use that British term. Um, that at the higher levels though, sometimes like what I see, like when Sean Luke is engaging with Roman Catholic thinkers or others, not just to single out any two. These are great dialogues, by the way. I think that there's another like higher level down the road though, where we can also go, things aren't always how they appear to be. There's more mystery going on here. I always love to quote this great C.S. Lewis quote. I don't know it off the top of my head and heart, but he begins by saying, I grant that no schism is without sin. Or he says, I do not hold it to be certain that all schism is done in sin. Think about that. And then he says, I do grant that no schism is without sin, but one proposition does not necessarily follow the other.
Hmm.
And then he says, what am I to make of your Thomas More and our William Tyndale? And he's talking to a Roman Catholic friend of his, Don Giovanni Calabria. And he says, lately I've read both men right through. And he says, frankly, I'm not worthy to undo the shoes of either man. He says, and yet what racks and astounds me is their disagreement does not spring from their ignorance nor from their vices, but rather it's their difference springs from their virtues and their depth of understanding. And then he goes on to say, he considers that the judgment of God on these matters is more profoundly hidden than it appears to you to be, for indeed his judgments are an abyss.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the most profound things I've ever heard, to be honest. And it's kind of just this notion, again, we have to immediately qualify, this does not mean pluralism, all religions are the same. It doesn't mean that at all.
Yeah.
But what it does mean is those endowed with the Holy Spirit and the entirety of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, which Christ promises that the gates of hell will not prevail against it, that the Holy Spirit can work in, through, and among his people. And even in these long-standing disagreements over hundreds of years, that real unity and substantial agreement can come through deep, deep discernment and love.
Hmm.
And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, bro. C.S. Lewis's definition of love is, for one, and this is the more well-known of the two parts, I would say. One is willing the good of another for their sake. Okay, so
Hmm.
something that's not based on you. But the second part of it is also willing union with that person or thing. And I think about that. So what does that mean for us as Anglicans to love the rest of Christendom? And there's a sense of seeking union with them, and that requires this type of work that's been done. So again, I guess there's a distinction here between like the catechetical level for most people,
Yeah.
and there is a need to dive into the Carolingians and the reformers from the 16th century, the Carolingians from the 17th. I would say another movement I'd add in, I know I'm a Methodist background, but I do think the religion of the heart movement in the 18th century is actually really important. We can get to this then, bro, but I actually think it's very monastic, which is really interesting. It's kind of an early monastic movement. The Methodist revival within the Church of England is very monastic in the way that their groups worked and the way they meet in small groups. And it just had a monastic element to it, the way they fasted. And then the 19th century, for sure, the Oxford movement, I think, has a lot to speak into this. But then the best of the 20th century holds these in tension. Again, on one hand, the 20th century goes to disaster mode. And on the other hand, it brings out figures like Henry Chadwick. Have you read much Henry Chadwick before, bro? Or engaged
Um,
with him? Him and his brother Owen?
very briefly, not like if you were to like ask
Yeah.
me to quote something, I wouldn't be able to do that. But
Yeah.
like
I mean, I couldn't
in
either.
passing, I have, yeah. Like I
But I
actually
know,
fully,
sorry, I
yeah.
don't mean to put you on the spot either. But I mean,
You're good.
again, I'm not talking like I
You're good.
haven't read him really either. Um, but what I can say about him is, so Henry Chadwick, for example, led the Archic discussions after Vatican II. So the Anglican Roman Catholic International Commission, which in my mind is like the best theological work ever done. And he's actually buried with a stole that he got from Pope St. John Paul II. Henry Chadwick is like one of
Mhm.
the greatest Anglican
Yeah.
minds. And so that's the type of thing that I hope that some of this great catechetical work can clarify certain things that we hold as principles. I almost see it like pillars in the temple. Like, again, I think a very Anglican notion in the 39 articles when read properly is a sign and sacrament distinction that is Augustinian. So it's kind of like in the apostolic era, or excuse me, sometimes and I'm not saying this is dogmatically in either way, but sometimes in the medieval area, the Latin church would, the tendency or the concern was of collapsing of sign and sacrament, and the Protestant concern was like separating them, and that leads to like what you're talking about, like the this notion of like, you know, a non-real presence view, you know, like
Hmm.
like a yeah, just a memorialist view. But the Augustinian view was holding sign and sacrament here. And that's true with the church and with the Eucharist and with other things as well. And so it has a reality to it that speaks. And I think the 39 articles are largely in substance intended to hold this Augustinian principle, which interestingly, I think Vatican II and Unitatis Redintegratio actually like carries forward in a sense. The Novel theologians are they think in my mind in a very patristic or Anglican way. And so my hope is just that these catechetical initiatives can kind of that this can be part of the conversation there.
Yeah.
Um, Again, sorry, that's a little bit of a riff, man, but that
Very
brings
good.
kind of, I think, some of the visions of our two channels and where we're both feeling called by God to go. I think that's an important conversation to have of how can those
Yeah.
converge and find a place table. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, though. And this could kind of lead us into the third part, which
Yeah.
is kind of, you know, talking about some of this stuff.
Yeah. No, I don't have like any doubt in my mind. For instance, like when I'm in heaven, like I'm going to see a Lutheran or a Roman Catholic. I think I'm going to like there are three people off the top of my head that aren't Anglicans where I tell people, I'm like, if they didn't make it to heaven, then I have no chance. And
I heard you
that,
say about, yeah.
yeah, like that's Billy Graham, Charles Spurgeon, and Thomas Aquinas. I'm like, if those three guys aren't
Oh,
in
there you
heaven, then
go,
like,
man.
yeah, then I
I heard
like,
you add Ortland to that list the other day too on
yeah,
one of the live
Ortland, yeah,
streams.
he's one of the entire Ortland family is just an absolute godsend. Like,
I know, man.
yeah,
They're an
so
ecumenical project in many of themselves.
yeah,
But
and
yeah.
so it's like while I would like to have a lot of these ecumenical dialogues, I guess again the only little pushback I probably would have is there are lots of people that would be on board with it, but I think at the same time, and I say this because I used to be super ecumenical as well. It's like everybody wants to be ecumenical until it's time to start giving things up, and then suddenly
Hmm.
everybody gets pretty testy. Like, um, because this is my background. While in the Church of Christ, I happen to work with a lot of Baptists, and they would say, "Oh yeah, dude, we're just here to worship God together. We're just here to worship God together until it's time for an altar call." And suddenly, well, this is just a public declaration of faith. You know, baptism doesn't do anything. And like, of course, me and as a Church of Christ believing in baptism and regeneration, it's like, well, no,
Yeah.
actually. And then it's like, you know, I worked well with this Methodist church when I was
Those guys.
I was a preacher at my second church. And it's like, you know, me and the preacher guy, we got along crazy until, you know, at the time he's like, well, you know, this is, you know, I don't know fully how he worded, but he pretty much explained some sort of like real presence at the time, and it was like at that point I was still a memorialist, and I was like, well, you know, I don't know about that because every time I eat my bread and juice, like I taste bread and juice, not Jesus. Like what's going on here? And then it's like we would work well together, but then it's like, all right, now let's start talking theology and doctrine, especially things like Roman Catholicism. It's like you're going to have an Anglican that goes, well, I don't believe in the papacy. And you're going to have a Roman Catholic that says, you know, you have to believe in a papacy. It's like, how do you get A and B to work here and come together? And it's like, again, does that mean that both of these guys won't be in heaven? Like, I don't know. That's up to God. If they're faithful to Jesus and are lively in their faith, I believe, again, Thomas Aquinas and Spurgeon are going to be both in heaven. But it's like, but here in this present time on earth, how can this practically come about that isn't just going to turn into online monkeys throwing crap
Yeah.
at each other
Yeah.
debate
Which
and
doesn't
be fruitful?
usually isn't that edifying. You know,
No.
if I could just hop in real quick, because I think this is
Yeah.
so interesting, bro. Again, forgive me for sounding repetitive here, but a
No.
little riff here.
You're good.
One thing I talk a lot about, because I think that this is important, and I want to state, like, for those interested in this is not just like my opinion. You can really, like, again, I would say check out, this is a movement that very few people know about, but it's a very consequential movement, the Malines Conversation Group. So this is a 100-year-old group that is predominantly about the Roman Catholic, like high level figures in the Roman Catholic Church, meeting with high level Anglican figures from the Anglican Communion and trying to hash out Anglican holy orders. So they originally started meeting in the 1920s, and it's called the Malines Conversation Group because it was the Archbishop of Malines in Belgium that would meet with some of the high ranking. At this point, I think it was actually a high ranking lay member, but now it's done with, like, you know, the canon theologian of Westminster Abbey, or it's supported by the Archbishop of Canterbury, stuff like that. But what these conversation groups do is they try to hash out, okay, we know what Apostolic Curiae says, we know what Sapius Officio says, you know what I mean? We know how, traditionally, like, Roman things are, like, things, these declarations within the Roman Church are carried out, and we know how Anglicanism feel about our own orders, right? And what they've done is they've tried to come together. And recently, this was, I believe, in 2021. So this is only like 5 years ago. We're recording this in 2026 for those watching. 5 years ago, they came out with a document called Sororis and Spe. Now, what that means is Sororis and Spe means sisters in hope. So this is really interesting. King James the First actually had Mary Tudor. I don't know if you know this, Zach, but it's really
Mhm.
interesting. Mary Tudor and Queen Elizabeth are actually buried in the same tomb.
Hmm.
King James the First had Mary Tudor and Queen Elizabeth placed in the same tomb in Westminster Abbey, and on the bottom of the tomb is written an inscription, "Sororis and Spe Resurrectiones," which is "Sisters in Hope of the Resurrection." And so that's the title of this document that came out in 2021, and it's calling for the Roman Church to acknowledge and recognize the validity of Anglican holy orders. But what they do is they kind of state, like, okay, the scholastic view of this, the arguments back and forth between Apostolic Curiae and Sapius Officio, these have been hashed out elsewhere, like in Dom Gregory Dix or in other figures. Um, and they're saying those are very edifying and important. But what they try to do is they use what I would call an eschatological epistemic. And so, like you're talking about, I know I'll see these people in heaven, right? What they try to do is they say, okay, if we know that that's real, then that should then dictate how we view validity now, and that it's more complicated than. And I love scholasticism. I'm like a
Mhm.
full-blown Thomist. So I feel like St. Paul giving my credentials, bro. I'm the Jew of Jews, you know what I mean? I'm a Thomist of Thomists, scholastic of scholastics. But so they talk about, though, if we go beyond those categories, the eschatological reality can speak to the now. And then this leads to something like, I'd encourage any listeners to check this out. It's called the Bishop of Rome document. It just came out, and it's a really important part of the modern dicastery for the promotion of Christian unity in the Roman Church's view of how they engage with other Christians. And a lot of it's built off their dialogue with the Anglicans. And what it's about is it's about the potential for a differentiated full communion. So, like, how could the papacy serve as like a locus of unity while allowing different jurisdictions to have their own integrity and without full amalgamation into one rite, right? And even without doctrinal, like requiring doctrinal change from the Anglican perspective, but allowing us to have our own integral, what's the right word? Just our own, like, coherence with our doctrine, but then also saying there can be a differentiated full communion. And interesting, I think that's interesting because I think that can speak to how sometimes can we get past some of the like there's this and there's this option and we got to pick one road or the other. Um, but that's always said with, we got to be careful that that doesn't slip into the pluralism we've both been
Mhm.
showing concern
Yeah.
about. But again, I want to make sure I'm not, just real quick, and then I want to get your reflections. I want to make sure that I'm not, as the same time, I don't want to misrepresent what you're saying or strawman. There's different levels, right? There's the
Yeah.
catechetical level. Again, are you at young life stage, or as a prospectively, and I say this with respect, is a Christian at this stage or at this stage? Is our nation at this stage? Is the online dialogue at this stage? I guess my hope is just to insert that into the conversation as well. This notion of, at the highest level, a lot of these ecumenical things have been worked at since Vatican II. So, like, the gift of authority document talks about what I'm talking about right now, and that's an
Mhm.
official promulgation of the Anglican Communion, I believe. I know it's officially from those dialogues. I don't know. I know the one on the Eucharist was unanimously accepted by the Anglican Communion. In the year 1988, at Lambeth 1988. So that would include all these jurisdictions of Anglicanism we're talking about within our view. At least most of them, I guess. I think the Continuum would probably adhere to those things. But anyways,
Probably,
I
yeah.
don't know if you have any reflections on all that.
Yeah,
That's a lot, but
yeah. Like I said, I mean, obviously, I will confess I don't know everything all the time, all at once, and so I'd have to look into these
yeah,
things a little
me,
bit
me
more.
either, bro.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah. I mean, yeah,
I know
like I
about
said,
what I
like
know, but
yeah, exactly. It's like I know Christ prays for church unity, and obviously
yeah,
that's one of the things
yeah.
I want to do. So it's like I'm not being a separatist just to just be like shake my fist and spiting the Roman Catholics or anything like that. It's like yeah, like if that can work out, it can. I guess, like I said, since you're working on that stage of like society, especially, are we at that level? I think in minorities, I would say probably, um, but probably right now, especially just online, we're getting so polarized,
Mhm.
and if it can happen, I don't know if it can happen yet. I think it's probably going to be like a bit of like a rubber band where it's like right now there's high tension, and until we get to the part where we can meet together again, it's like we're still getting pulled this way. I mean, again, look at politics, for instance. A lot of the middle, while it's still there, is not as strong as extremes on both ends. And then you get a lot of these calls for traditionalism, and it's like, while there have been ecumenical dialogues and everything like that, it's like, while this group did say that it was what conversation was it about the
It's
Anglican
the
orders?
Malines
Yeah,
conversation
so
group.
the Malines conversation, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, that'd be cool to look into it. I'd like to look more into that, but a lot of people I get on Rome and the Anglican side don't really know about it.
Mhm.
And the first thing everybody's going to point to is, well, what did the Pope say about the orders? And you're going to get Anglicans who go, well, I don't care that your Pope said my orders are invalid. I'm not under, like, the Pope has no jurisdiction in this realm. Or you're going to get the polar opposite of Roman Catholics by saying, well, I don't care what you think. The Pope said so. And it's like getting those two people to meet in that middle with that conversation. Like I said, like if it can happen, like
Yeah.
that would be one thing that could have some budding fruit. But can it happen right now? I'm not totally sure.
It's one of those things. I mean, the church moves in centuries, right?
Hmm.
Like sometimes I'll tell you what, Zach, this is interesting, bro. I have my Methodist side, which is very much so like, all right, today, bro. Like we got to
Hmm.
do this today. And then
Yeah.
that comes into conversation with my Catholic side, which is like it's so slow and like
Hmm.
you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
steadily built over time. And those kind of things conflict within my own life. I've got that Wesley side and then I've got like the more traditional side.
I'm the same way. I get it.
Yeah, which is just quite an inner dialogue, and I see it occurring in the real world, and like you said, in yourself. Just it happens all around us, right?
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, I think there's it's kind of what you just said about earlier when you said you got to be the change that you want to see.
Hmm.
That would be again my hope is I love so much of what's going on with the Catechetical Institute and with the Anglican Renaissance as a whole, and I want to support like all the good I see there. I guess my hopeful addition into the conversation is just this notion of the ecumenical movement as well, and what's already been kind of hashed out. I'd say at the best levels. Somebody left a really interesting comment on one of my videos the other day, and I think it provides a helpful imagery. They said if Anglicanism is like if we're looking at the letters of the alphabet, Anglicanism can be like A through. I'm not going to say exactly what they said because I can't remember, but let's say it's like A through P, and Roman Catholicism is like G through Z. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
The ecumenical movement is in between G and P. And so you've got Anglicans who aren't quite to the middle part yet,
Yeah.
and you've got Roman Catholics who aren't quite here. And I think like I see Vatican II as like a movement here, and I see the Anglican 20th century, the good parts of it that try to hold in tension are Celtic, Reformational, Latin, Carolingian, evangelical, and Tractarian period together. I see that moving us here. Um, but uh I think we still have to keep working at like what are we saying I just think that charitableness towards the other can be helpful, regardless of which direction we're talking, right? Like if we're talking with the Lutheran, if we're talking with the Presbyterian, or if we're talking with Rome or the East, I think just that like seeking for peace. Gavin Ortland used this word, but that irenicism. Um, and I think like I see that a lot in what you're saying too, but I think that notion can be really helpful.
Mhm.
Um, I think yeah, I think that's a helpful thing because I think a lot of good work's already been done. I guess I just want to flag, and it's interesting.
Yeah.
Like you brought up, what does the Pope say? Again, this isn't like an infallible statement, but in January 2026, so earlier this year, Pope Leo at Vespers on the feast of the conversion of St. Paul, he's standing at St. Paul outside the walls, so where St. Paul's beheaded, and he looks over to his left, or over to his, I think it's over to his left, it's to his right,
Yeah.
is a representative of the ecumenical patriarch of Bartholomew, a
Mhm.
representative of his. And on the left is a representative from the Anglican communion. I believe it's Bishop Anthony Ball. He leads the Anglican Center of Rome. And he looks and he says, this is verbatim what he says. He says, "We are one. We already are. Let us recognize it, experience it, and make it visible." And see, so when I hear that, I go like, okay, recognize it. That's an ontological reality. So that's basically similar to Anglican branch theory. Experience it, that sounds like sacramental unity, which is again another emphasis of our tradition. And then thirdly, let us make it visible. And so I think that can be a helpful way, again, at the top end of this, like where people are, that can
Yeah.
be helpful. But yeah. But again, man, know that I'd love to see the fruit of this
Yeah.
particular movement, the Anglican Renaissance, flourish and do well. And I think it's definitely good to bring the average person back into so many of the standards that are set by somebody like Hooker. Like I love that on Saint Saint Luke's. Yeah, I'm thinking Saint Sean Luke
I
on
mean,
his
I
channel.
don't
And hey, Saint Zach here. I love that. I love that you guys are, and others as well. But I love that you guys are engaging in like the laws of ecclesiastical polity and kind of working through that. I think that's really important. I think it's important to go back to the Carolingians, and I think that this notion of trying to draw out what were some of the concerns and the emphasis of the reformers and of the Carolingians, I think can actually provide really helpful um, lens for us in the modern world to not get caught up in some of the nonsense we've been talking about.
know. Mhm.
I'm just plugging that I think that can also fit with post Vatican II conciliarism or the Novell theologians, and
Yeah.
that can be a helpful dialogue. So
Yeah, because like even in
yeah,
the Anglican Renaissance movement, there has to be at least some ecumenicism if I am going to,
yeah,
like especially just if we
yeah.
were to zoom in on the
Even within
Anglican world.
Anglicanism,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Where it's
yeah.
like, I want to work with the RECNA, ECNA. Why? Because that's how we survive. Anglicans should be helping Anglicans. So it's like if
Yeah,
I'm just gonna make it a just a UECNA thing and say everybody else are damnable and going to hell, it's like, oh, that's not gonna exactly Renaissance anything. That's gonna be an Anglican isolationist movement.
yeah,
And so, yeah, and so that's why, especially when the ACNA was going through its hard riffs, since that's the word we're using, like,
yeah.
yeah, people were like,
God's peace to all.
yeah, it's like when people are like, oh, like, what do you think? What do you think? It's like, well, I'm not cheering on the ACNA while they're like hurting, because
Yeah,
if I'm gonna cheer and watch the ACNA's ship sink to the ocean, who's gonna help me when like if God
yeah,
forbid my ship starts sinking?
mm,
It's like it would be better if I could, chuck a hook. Obviously, this is not how sailing totally works, but like chuck a hook onto their boat, climb all the way over there, and start patching holes for them, so that if something were to happen to me, they can start doing the same. And we could work together in that way. And so, yeah, so like I don't, I don't find joy in the death of fellow Anglican denominations because they're not me. It's like,
yeah. That's that love principle from C.S.
yeah,
Lewis, right? Is you
yeah,
will
exactly,
union with them. Like we want to hash these things out, like even within Anglicanism, and then certainly within Christendom.
yeah, exactly.
Um, yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting, man. Well, I appreciate so much of the good that's like I appreciate all the good that's going on in the Anglican Renaissance, and I really want to support the good work that you're doing, man.
I really
So I
appreciate it.
appreciate you hashing this out with me, and thanks for listening to my kind of 2 cents. You know what I mean?
You're
Adding
good.
it in. I think there's a lot of different parts of this conversation. I guess I'll end this section with this if this helps. All right, two things I guess I'd say, and then if you have any concluding thoughts with this before we go on to our last point. I feel like it's kind of like a relationship. If anybody's relationships, man, on a sense, you just got to hop into it. But in another sense, they are complicated, man. I mean, life is just complicated, and each individual relationship is going to have like each marriage or whatever, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. They're going to have their own like dynamics, and you do have to learn the dynamics if you really want to succeed in it. However, you also don't want that to be the only thing you think of. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Just the nuances all the time. Sometimes you also have to just get to, the living out in love, and sometimes time and space and mutual working at it can help build understanding. But again, that's not a one-to-one analogy, but
Yeah.
I think there's some interesting correlations there. Secondly, if I could close with this quote from Arthur Michael Ramsey. I think this is I say this a lot on my channel if anybody's watched much, but I think that this kind of to me sums up what I see as Anglicanism. And this, by the way, comes from his book, The Gospel and the Catholic Church from 1936. So I think he was in his 20s when he wrote this. He was younger than me, to my knowledge. But he writes, the Anglican Church, while vindicated by its place in history through a strikingly balanced witness to the gospel, to the church, and to sound learning. Excuse me, let me restart this. Although the Anglican Church is vindicated by its place in history, with a strikingly balanced witness to the gospel, to the church, and to sound learning, its greater vindication lies in pointing through its own life to something of which it is a fragment. Its credentials are its incompleteness, with the tension and travail in its soul. It is clumsy and untidy, and it baffles neatness and logic, for it is sent not to commend itself as, quote, the best type of Christianity, but rather through its very brokenness to point to the universal church, wherein all have died. And I think that is such a beautiful kind of vocational calling for Anglicanism. It has its own integral reality, but really, just like every human has to live a cruciform life, that our tradition actually lives a cruciform reality too. And so it bears in it, within its life, all these different epochs of time. It bears its Celtic period, its Latin period, its Reformational, its Carolingian, its evangelical, and its Tractarian movement. And it kind of bears these at its best intention. And I think that's what a lot of the time coming from around after the English Civil War in the 1662 BCP, I think that's what it's trying to do, is it's trying to bear in tension some of these past movements, but then it also has new ones come up too, right? Like the evangelical movement of the Methodists or the Tractarians or stuff in the 20th century. So I don't know if you have any concluding thoughts, but that's just something I would plug as it's a way that we could potentially think about part of our vocation.
Yeah. I
As a,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, like I think conversations like that could happen, but it's just one of those like is I guess going back to what I was saying, like is the timing right? And until I joked about this before you hit record, where where I can go on Twitter and type in "the sky is blue" and not have 1,000 contrary opinions. Like,
Yikes, man.
yeah, it's like I think maybe one day that could happen, but we'll just have to just keep
Yeah.
looking at it in a
Yeah.
Catholic setting of in the
Yeah.
long run, and
Yeah. It's
then
a long
at the
run
same
thing.
time zoom in, start chipping away slowly at those things. But yeah, like
Yeah.
I said, there has to be some sort of unity again. And that's what I'd like for the Renaissance movement, especially. It's just
Yeah.
as an Anglican church, we have to unite. But now the question is, and the movement to get there is, how can this happen? How can we get here? So,
It's this eternal tension, right? In some ways, hopefully it won't be eternal, but
mhm,
between there are people who think in the clouds like me, and I think that's important to have that. But then you also need like people on the ground with the brass tacks, like, all right,
mhm.
but this is where we are now, and how are we going to move forward with our jurisdictions? I think that those actually need each other. Again, that's like a
Yeah,
Romans 9 to 11 principle. But I
yeah,
think that
exactly.
God works in funny ways because I think both can be
Yeah,
both can be inserted into a conversation at the same time. Well, bro, that actually gets us to the fourth question I wanted to bring up to you. Are you okay time wise? By the way, I know this has
yeah,
gone really long, man. I
yeah. No, you're
appreciate your
good.
time. By the way, this is sweet. This is a for those watching. I think you'll know this. But this is my first time ever doing an interview, so I'm honestly I'm honored to have you on, Zach.
Like I said, I appreciate it.
And I count you as a friend, brother. So I appreciate just
Awesome.
getting to know you and hope we can continue to dialogue
Yeah.
going in the future. But so the fourth question I want to ask, just in a loose sense, this actually what we just talked about transitions into this. Where do you see, and if you want to keep this more brass tacks, we can.
Mhm.
Again, I've taken us into eschatological things quite a bit in this, but where do you see like in the next few years, and then even like, let's say a century from now, or even a couple centuries, what do you see happening in Anglicanism? And where do you kind of see, so we've got our North American landscape, right, with all these different jurisdictions. They all kind of have their own flavor and emphasis, but they're all still, I'd say, you know, if we include all the Orthodox, really Anglican. Um, what do we, where do you see us going from here? And then how does that play into our, our setting within the larger One Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church? How do
Yeah.
you see that playing out?
No, this is where I think big in the clouds when I think about future things. I'm a very abstract thinker.
Are you? Yeah.
So
You're a philosopher, man. I like it.
Yeah.
Great
So
philosophers make great theologians.
I know. For me, it really depends on what happens now. I think especially. Okay, I'm gonna try to give an answer that doesn't go.
Yeah, I hear you. Feel free, man.
Yeah. The phrase "history is written by the victors" is a saying for a reason. And that's why I was saying it all depends on what happens right now, because we're in such a crucial, tense moment, just in general with history right now, where, in another sense, I look at passages from James where he says, you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. It's like a mist. One day you're here, the next minute you're not. Like, who knows? Maybe the Anglican Renaissance picks up and it becomes a worldwide thing in my dreams. But let's say it does. And there is this staunch, hard pullback to conservatism. That could happen. Maybe there is a balancing of the middle of some sort where nothing really happens and we just kind of go on with the show. And it's like, maybe my effort and the effort of the Anglican Renaissance movement and everything else was completely in vain. We get swallowed up into such a liberal denomination, we die. It's like, who knows? And so it's hard to really look at it in a century from now and say, well, what's going to happen? Because it's like, right now, I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Maybe the ACNA comes back strong. Maybe the Church of England has a change of heart. Maybe the GAC becomes Presbyterian. I don't know. It's like it's one of those, like, I like to look at like little alternative scenarios of life like that, and it's like it's hard to say, because it's like it could go either way right now. But what I do have hope for, and this is just especially in Christendom in general, is it's the youth right now who are waking up. And I think the big thing that really brought people back to the feet of God in one way or another was COVID, where we kind of had our little minor apocalyptic event that didn't really do anything, but it was enough for people to go,
God bless.
Yeah, thank God. But it's like we look at it now and go, wow. In a matter of months, I went from going to high school, or I was in college at the time. It's like going to college, day to day, everything was normal, to suddenly I'm locked in a dorm for like a month in virtual solitary confinement with my roommate. True story, by the way.
It's like wild, man.
Yeah,
I realized that was a thing.
Yeah, it's like that happened, and then like suddenly everybody just kind of forgot about it, dropped in, and like went on with their day, and it was like, but that little condensed moment there was, oh, everything is completely out of my control, and there was nothing I can do about it. Is that what life is? And like these young people were waking up and like, well, look at the landscape right now. People don't even know what truth is. And like some things that are just so like 1 + 1 = 2 type of deal. If you like to kind of slightly reference Orwell, and it's like everything is just so in the chaos, in the discombobulation, and it's like people just want to know what is this? What is the purpose of this? Why are we doing this? Why is everything so chaotic and crazy? And then when they can look at the beauties of history and look at the beauty of what Christianity brings, and it's like, I don't have to be the arbiter of my truth, because there is one truth, and he's the truth, the way, and the life. And young people are just accepting this, and there has been a growth in Christianity because of it, so much so that the decline plateaued. And while I don't know what is going to happen entirely, because again, like I said, right now we're in such a moment where things need to happen, but how it happens, I don't know, but I want to be a part of it. The hope I have right now is people are starting to come back to God, because they realize we can't do it on our own anymore, and we need an answer of some kind. And that's why I love doing stuff like this on YouTube and working with guys like you and Sean and whatnot, because it's like we can be those lighthouses that God tells us to be, and be like, come on, like, you don't have to suffer anymore, you don't have to do these things anymore, and we can bring you to such truth and beauty where it can change your life. And it doesn't matter who you are. You can be a killer like Paul, you can be a prostitute like Mary of Egypt, you can be, a warlord, like, I think it was a warlord, but like at least some sort of gang member like Moses the Black, for instance, because I'm into Desert Fathers and whatnot. So it's like, you can be these people, and Christ changed every single one of them and brought them to be holy people. So it's like, yeah, young people can do this, old people can do it, everybody can do this. And it's crucial now, because like I said, it takes people like us to now do something, so that when I'm, a bag of bones probably thrown in the side of like a ditch or something like that, and life moves on without me, people go, well, it was because of these guys over here that saw how crucial life is right now, and how crucial Christendom is, and said, I want to bring people to a better way of life. And I believe that will be for the benefit. And I do see Anglicanism growing from that and everything. But for right now, we're that deciding factor that makes or breaks it. And so that's, I know that didn't totally answer your what happens in 100 years question, but it's one of those, like, that's just how I look at things.
I think that's a great answer, bro, to be honest. I think that's actually, that's a great place to just kind of wrap this up, man. I think, we just always have to remember, we serve a God who brings beauty out of chaos. So we see this in the cosmos, right? Genesis 1. We see this, and I always love to point this out. We see this in Noah. We see this in the basket of Noah through the wildness of the Nile rivers. And then Jesus's birth and the incarnation, and through the chaos of even what childbearing is, and the waters of his mother come into the world. And so I think that's a great note to end on, man. We serve a God who brings order out of chaos. And there is a sense of we just have to trust and hope. But then, like you've been saying, and like I think your whole ministry points to, you got to do stuff on the ground to work at that too. So, well, dude, I appreciate you coming on the channel, man. I think this is great, Zach. Again, I want to give a plug to anybody watching. Check out Zach's channel, man. He's got a lot of great stuff there. Make sure, I'd encourage a subscription to his channel. One to our channel can help as well. But again, I look forward to working with you more in the future, man. For those watching as well, I just give a quick plug for my channel. I actually have another interview coming up this next Tuesday with Austin Suggs from Gospel Simplicity, which I'm super stoked about as well. Yeah, we're going to talk about Anglican and Roman Catholic, the ecumenical discussions, some of them which I referenced here, and kind of get his thoughts on that. But I give a plug for that. I know Zach's got probably big projects coming up as well. I don't know all of them. But yeah, so again, thanks for joining us today, guys. And could we close, Zach, with like we talked about before, with the prayer of general thanksgiving? I think that's just a great place to kind of wrap things up in the midst of this. Do you want to lead us, man? I can. That'd be great. Yeah, we're going to read from the 2019 prayer book, guys, for anybody who may know this prayer.
All right. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost.
Amen.
Almighty God, Father of all mercies, we, your unworthy servants, give you humble thanks for all your goodness and loving kindness to us and to all whom you have made. We bless you for our creation, preservation, and all the blessings of this life, but above all for your immeasurable love in the redemption of the world by our Lord Jesus Christ, for the means of grace and for the hope of glory. And we pray, give us such an awareness of your mercies, that with truly thankful hearts we may show forth your praise, not only with our lips, but in our lives, by giving up ourselves to your service, and by walking before you in holiness and righteousness all our days. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, to whom, with you and the Holy Spirit, be honor and glory throughout all ages. Amen.
Amen. Zach, thank you so much, brother. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. God's peace to all, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.
God bless you.
God bless.